There's something special about the start of a motorcycle trip. The night before, you're double checking the route, packing the bike, and trying to get a little sleep, even though you're already thinking about the road ahead. The morning arrives, the bike is loaded, the tank is full, the GPS is programmed, hundreds of miles and a new destination are waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. For me, that's one of the best feelings in motorcycling. It doesn't matter whether the trip is 100 miles or 1,000 miles. The moment you roll out of the driveway, everyday life starts fading away and the adventure begins. This motorcycle trip will take me from home in Georgia to Little Rock, Arkansas, with an overnight stop in Tunica, Mississippi. Along the way, there will be scenic roads, some Harley-Davidson dealerships, a casino, plenty of interstate miles, and a few unexpected surprises. But Little Rock is really just the beginning. This is the first episode in a multi-part motorcycle adventure in Arkansas. Over the next few days, I'll be riding a couple of the state's most famous roads, exploring the Ozark Mountains, and seeing firsthand why so many riders consider Arkansas one of the best motorcycle destinations in America. But before we get to the twisty roads and mountain scenery, we have to get there. The weather forecast looked good. Partly cloudy skies, comfortable temperatures, only a small chance of rain. Or at least, that's what it said the day before I left home. I started out at about 8 a.m., which was about an hour later than I'd planned. But if you've ever done a long-distance motorcycle trip, that is usually the way things go. However, that actually ended up working out in my favor. Daylight had fully broke as I rolled out of the neighborhood and pointed the front wheels towards the interstate. It was pleasantly cool, but cloudy. The first few miles of a trip always feel a little different. You're still thinking about home, wondering if you forgot anything, getting comfortable in the saddle, and settling into the rhythm of the ride. As the miles started rolling underneath my tires, those everyday thoughts began to fade away. The traffic was light as it was a Sunday morning, and little by little, the rest of the world got left behind. That's one of the things I love most about long-distance motorcycle trip. It doesn't take long before the bike becomes your entire world. Arkansas was still hundreds of miles away, but the adventure was officially underway. However, no matter how carefully you plan for a motorcycle trip, the road always has a few surprises waiting for you. Let's see what this ride has in store. In the days leading up to this trip, I probably checked the weather forecast about 100 times. Every update seemed to tell the same story. The best chance of rain was supposed to be much later in the day, somewhere around Huntsville, Alabama. Near home, the forecast was only calling for about a 15% chance of rain. That's better than good odds. Even though it was partly cloudy, I was feeling pretty confident that I'd stay dry at least for the first few hours. Less than an hour later, the road had other plans. The clouds started closing in and darkening just a little. At first, it was just a few drops of rain on the windshield, then a few more. I remember thinking, seriously? Already? Right here, right now, I was riding straight into that 15% chance of rain. Fortunately, it wasn't a downpour, just enough rain to remind me that motorcycles have a way of keeping you humble. Quick lesson: if you want to prepare yourself mentally a bit for what's about to come, look at the cars coming in the opposite direction. If they're still wet or their windshield wipers are still on, you're about to get wet. You can study the route, you can check the radar, you can plan every fuel stop and every overnight stay, but sometimes the road looks at all that planning and says, "That's cute." And just like that, less than an hour into a multi-state trip to Arkansas, I was getting my first unexpected adventure. Thankfully, it didn't last long. Once the rain moved through and the roads began to dry out, the ride settled into a rhythm. The miles gave way to something much more interesting as I made my way across northeast Alabama. This is one of those parts of the country that doesn't always get talked about when people discuss great motorcycle destinations. In the southeast, riders often think of the Smoky Mountains or the Blue Ridge Parkway. But northeast Alabama has a quiet beauty all its own. The road winds through a landscape that feels untouched by time. Small towns appear one after another, each with its own character. A few local businesses, old brick storefronts that have probably watched generations come and go. The kind of places where people still wave from the front porch, and where life seems to move at a slower pace. Between those towns are miles of rolling farmland stretching toward the horizon, weathered barns standing guard over fields that have been worked for decades, long fences tracing the contours of the hills. It's the kind of scenery that reminds you how much of America exists beyond the major cities and the interstate exits. As the miles roll by, the mountains begin to make their presence known. Not towering peaks, but long green hills that rise from the valleys. They seem to follow you for miles, appearing and disappearing as the road twists through the countryside. Every now and then, the view opens up just enough to reveal another mountain in the distance, layered behind the last one in shades of green and blue. It's the kind of landscape that's easy to overlook in a car, but on a motorcycle you experience it differently. The smell of the freshly cut hay drifting across the field. You feel the temperature change as you pass through the shaded valleys. You notice the scent of pine trees and the way the clouds cast moving shadows across the hills. That's one of the reasons I love traveling on a motorcycle. You don't just pass through places like this, you become part of them for just a little while. And somewhere out there among the farms, the small towns, the mountain ridges of northeast Alabama, I found myself forgetting about schedules, forgetting about weather forecasts, and forgetting about how many miles I had before I got to Little Rock. For a while, there was just nothing to think about except the next curve, the next view, or the next simple enjoyment of being on the road. Of course, one thing every long-distance motorcycle trip eventually requires is a fuel stop. Occasionally, when you're in the middle of nowhere, you start getting a little desperate and have to settle for whatever stop comes next. Sometimes, those fuel stops are not exactly at a shiny Buc-ee's with 150 gas pumps, spotless bathrooms, and enough beef jerky to feed a small army. Sometimes they're, well, different. You know the kind of place. The gas station appears out of nowhere. The sign out front may or may not still be standing completely upright. The parking lot looks like it lost its fight with a meteor shower 20 years ago. Well, that's where I ended up. As I pulled in, I couldn't help but wonder if this place was actually open. The gas pumps looked like they were installed sometime during the Reagan administration. The convenience store windows were covered with advertisements that haven't been relevant since the smartphone was invented. Now, don't get me wrong, I've met some wonderful people at gas stations like this, but there's also a certain feeling that comes over you when you stop. You suddenly become very focused on the mission. Fuel the bike, bathroom, grab a drink, and leave. It's not the kind of place where you're browsing the snack aisle looking for the perfect road trip chips. It's a tactical fuel stop. You're operating with purpose, in and out, because the longer you stay, the more it feels like you're either going to end up in a country music song, a true crime documentary, or both. Fortunately, the gas pumps worked, the bike got fed, and nobody asked me, was I from around here? A few minutes later, I was back on the road. As I worked my way through Huntsville, Alabama, one landmark immediately caught my attention. Off to the side of the highway stood the unmistakable outline of a rocket, the NASA Space Center. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't planning on stopping this trip. I had a lot of miles to cover before the day was done. But seeing the rocket rise above the trees was enough to make me slow down and take a longer look. There's just something about places like that. Think about it for a second. Less than a century ago, people were still amazed by crossing the country in an airplane. Then a few decades later, we were putting men on the moon. And a lot of that story passed right through Huntsville. As a kid, I was fascinated by space exploration. To be honest, I still am. Unfortunately, this wasn't the trip to stop and explore. Sometimes on a motorcycle journey, you have to make a choice. You can stop and spend a few hours discovering something new, or you can keep rolling toward the destination you've committed to. This time, the road won. But as I passed by, I found myself thinking the same thing I'm sure many riders have thought when they rode past an interesting place. Yep, I'm coming back. Because sometimes places deserve more than a quick glance from the highway. They deserve a full day, a camera, a curious mind, and plenty of time to wander around. So while Little Rock remained the destination for this ride, the NASA Space Center in Huntsville officially earned a spot on the list of future adventure. A little later in the day, I stopped for fuel and then got right back on the road. Then, a couple miles down the road, I spotted a Harley dealership. Now, if you're a Harley rider, you know the rule. If you've got a few extra minutes and there's a dealership nearby, you're stopping. So I pulled in, stretched my legs, checked out the bikes, spent a few minutes looking around, and got back on the road. So here we are, y'all. We stopped in at Natchez Trace Harley-Davidson along our route. Just happened to stumble across it, thought we'd stop in, say hi, maybe pick up a poker chip. From there, I made my way on to Highway 72, heading through West Alabama and Mississippi. Now, every motorcycle trip has those stretches of road that become legendary for scenery, curves, and views. This isn't one of them. Highway 72 seems determined to go as straight as humanly possible, mile after mile of flat pavement stretched towards the horizon like somebody drew the route with a ruler. And along the way, the weather decided to make things more interesting. The cool morning temperatures were long gone. In their place came that classic southern combination of heat and humidity that makes you wonder if you're riding through air or warm soup. By this point in the day, I wasn't riding Highway 72 because it was exciting. I was riding it because it was taking me where I needed to go. Sometimes that's part of motorcycle travel too. Not every mile is a destination. Some miles are simply the miles you have to ride to reach the next adventure. So I settled into the saddle, turned up the music, watched the miles click by, and kept rolling west toward Tunica, Mississippi, and the end of day one. After a long day in the saddle, the Horseshoe Casino in Tunica, Mississippi finally came into view. And let me tell you, after getting rained on first thing in the morning, heat, humidity, and the seemingly endless miles of Highway 72, seeing that hotel sign felt pretty good. The evening started with a good meal, because after several hundred miles on a motorcycle, just about anything tastes better than it normally would. After dinner, I spent a little time exploring the casino floor. I did a little gambling. Although I was tempted by an 8 p.m. poker tournament, I knew I was too tired to play sharp. Maybe next trip. I stuck to mindless slot machines, had enough luck to keep playing for a little while, but not enough to retire early. Eventually, it was time to call it a night and get some rest before the final leg to Arkansas. The next morning was a welcome change from most days of travel. There was no alarm clock forcing me out of bed before sunrise, no rush to pack and roll on. Little Rock was only a couple hours away, and hotel check-in time wouldn't be till later that afternoon. So I took my time, enjoyed a slow morning, grabbed some breakfast, and let the day ease into motion. Around noon, I finally climbed back on the bike, fired up the Harley, and pointed it west once again. With only a short ride ahead and plenty of time before hotel check-in in Little Rock, there was no reason to rush. So before heading west, I made a quick detour to Southern Thunder Harley-Davidson, just south of Memphis. One of the things I enjoy about motorcycle travel is discovering dealerships along the way. Every one of them has its own personality, its own riders, and its own local flavor. Since I wasn't racing the clock, I spent a little time looking around, checking out the showroom, and stretching my legs before getting back on the bike. It wasn't a long stop, but that's one of the advantages of having a flexible schedule. Sometimes, the best part of the day isn't the destination, it's the unexpected places you find along the way. With that quick visit behind me, it was time to point the Harley towards Arkansas and finish the ride to Little Rock. After leaving Southern Thunder Harley-Davidson, the rest of the ride to Little Rock was pretty straightforward. Interstate, more interstate, and then some additional interstate. It wasn't the most exciting stretch of the road trip, but it served the purpose. At one point, I passed the exit for Texarkana. I have to admit, I was a little disappointed. Based on a certain movie and the song that goes with it, I was expecting to find a truckload of Coors beer nearby. No luck. Apparently nobody got the memo. Bonus points if you know that reference. If you do, leave a comment below and let me know. Before long, Little Rock started appearing in the distance. And after 2 days on the road, I was finally rolling in and started looking forward to the next chapter of this adventure. Well, here we are, y'all. We have made it to Little Rock, Arkansas, and we are checking in to the Hilton Garden Inn you see behind me. I think tomorrow we're going to ride the Pig Trail. Look it up. Come join us. Well, that's going to wrap up the ride to Little Rock. Like most motorcycle trips, not every mile was exciting, but every mile was part of the adventure. And sometimes the memories that stick with you the longest come from the unexpected stops and the roadside discoveries and the moments you never planned for. But the trip is just getting started. In the next episode, we're headed into the mountains of Arkansas to ride one of the most famous motorcycle roads in the state, the Pig Trail. If you've ever wondered whether the Pig Trail lives up to its reputation, you're not going to want to miss that one. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already part of the channel, and leave me a comment below. Until next time, ride safe, keep learning, and remember, the road doesn't just take you somewhere, it teaches you something along the way.